Hey everyone, I'm Scott.
And I'm Susan. We're from Pragmatic Digital, and we're really excited to be a part of Voice Global.
Today we're going to be talking about connecting with your customers through voice.
So life as we know it has changed radically. How we work, how we play, and even how we shop has completely changed because of current events. And for some of us, this happened practically overnight. The thing is that some of these temporary behaviors are starting to become permanent. It takes about 66 days for a new behavior to become a habit. And some of us have been living these new behaviors now for more than 60 days. So as a result, we're seeing that consumer behaviors are now becoming altered. We're seeing studies from McKinsey. We even saw in the NPR Smart Audio report, behaviors are shifting and they're starting to stay that way.
And like Susan said, most consumers aren't going to go back to their old routines once this is all over with. As you can see here, there's a very small percentage of people that are actually saying they're going to do more going to the mall, more international travel, domestic travel even. And so really what we're seeing is people are going to do the same amount of these tasks as they had during the pandemic, or maybe even a little bit less. So these behaviors are going to be around for a very long time.
During this time, because we are living in ways that we haven't ever lived before, we are learning new ways to do what was usually a routine thing before. So grocery delivery, online ordering and pickup, those were things that were starting to take hold, but now they're becoming adopted and part of what is considered the next normal. Wellness apps, remote learning, online fitness. These are all things that people are learning to do within their own homes or on their own that they hadn't ever really tried to do before. But because of the necessary times, they're trying it and they're finding out that it's working. So they're going to continue doing it.
One really interesting stat that I found shows that 9% of consumers bought something online for the first time in March. And while it seems completely counterintuitive to those of us that have been buying stuff online for the past 20 years, there's this group of people that really had no interest in doing it before, but because of the situation they found themselves in, were kind of forced to do it. And so they've actually tried and bought things online, whether it be groceries or things that they would order online and then pick up curbside or whatever. But those people now are in the fold and will be continuing to buy things online as we move forward. The other interesting thing is 37% of consumers actually expect to spend more money online coming out of this situation. So we're seeing a tremendous amount of e-commerce interest, both first-time purchase, but also people that have been doing this for a while. So it's a really big behavior shift that we're starting to see. And like Susan said, it's here. It's something that's going to be permanent. We're not going to go back to the way it was before the pandemic. And it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just a reality of kind of where we are right now.
So what we're kind of seeing then is even though we're seeing new behaviors, people are still open to trying new things and adopting new technology, or at least what seems like new technology to them.
Right. Absolutely.
So that means that business does have this new reality of where distributed teams are becoming the norm. The focus of what is happening in store has moved away from surprise and delight and more towards safety and speed. I think I just saw a McKinsey report recently that was talking about the new realities of retail and that it's about learning how to adjust and extend their experiences beyond the store because consumers aren't sitting in stores now and browsing is kind of a luxury, especially in this time when you really have only so much time to get in and get out because you're trying to lessen your exposure to others and things like that. And the other interesting part of this too is that what's happened to sports and entertainment. And that stadium tours now are suddenly becoming crib tours, that people are showing you the insides of their homes more so than being together with a group of people in a giant stadium. And when it comes to sports, my goodness, I think all we have is bowling and I think NASCAR right now because we just don't have those events. So it's more about esports and things those ways. So a lot of things that have always been at this collective in-person experience are now becoming virtual. And that's happening to brands as well.
The other thing that's happened is we have about 90 million speakers in US homes right now. So according to the latest VoiceBot data, as of January 2020, there's 90 million homes. It was estimated that by this year, at least 50% of US homes would actually have one of these devices. So as you're starting to see people spend less time doing shopping behavior and less time, quite honestly, outside of the home. You also see a growth of these devices in home. So that actually gives you a pretty big opportunity.
It's a huge opportunity because as some of these channels are lessening out of home, because people just frankly aren't as out of their home as much, that exciting battleground that was the in-store shelf, all of those areas, as they are starting to lessen, there's still now this opportunity of this 90 million touch points that are actually within someone's home.
Yeah, and the other thing is like any sort of out-of-home marketing, so whether it's in-person events, sampling events, things at shelf, conferences, like all of those things have really been drastically impacted by the global pandemic. So while those are kind of the reality of where we're at right now, there is this opportunity to start leveraging these devices that are in 90 million homes to actually get your message out, interact with your audiences in ways that were never possible, quite honestly, before.
Yeah, and I think the thing to know too is that voice is part of this full experience now. We're hearing, and when we talk about some of these changes, they are permanent. Most of the things that I'm seeing right now are showing that months, years, it's going to be that this behavior is going to be there. So we have to kind of think about, all right, how do we work with these new technologies within the full ecosystem? And we've talked about this before, but it's really important to never forget that users' information needs don't change because of the interface or the device, but it does change the nature of that interaction. And we have to keep that in mind as we think about how do we connect now this opportunity that is voice with all of these other channels that are still out there and usable.
Yeah, our director of digital marketing has this great statement, and he always says, it's about putting yourself in danger of being found. And so whether it's, online or on smart speakers, as a brand or as a business, your job is to really put yourself in danger of being found by your audience because you don't know where they're going to actually first find you. So you want to make sure that you're available when they're looking on the device or on the platform that they're looking, so that when they do go there, you're there and it's not your competition.
And voice is going to be your secret weapon in that whole piece of it. And because voice is facilitating this one-to-one connection without this resource load. And what that basically means is that you don't have to have a single person who's reaching out each time to have these one-to-one connections. You can create this application, this experience that creates that. And even on a simple FAQ or a simple question and answer, that's still one-to-one. And it's important to know too that you're adding this dimension to what was just web copy. If you've put it into the proper conversational format, and then think through the sound and the way that your brand is going to sound to the rest of the world, you're going to be able to evoke much richer emotions and much deeper responses. So done well, you're going to be able to be cost efficient while still having these quality interactions. And what's even more exciting is in this time where disruptive behaviors, disruptive advertising, and disruptive marketing are not welcome, voice is, because it's initiated by the user. They're inviting your brand into their home so that you can have this conversation, which is something that hasn't happened for a very long time.
Yeah. The other great thing is smart speaker users are actually using their devices every single day. So what started out as a listening to music and setting a kitchen timer has actually moved into something a little bit more robust, where they're asking questions, they're looking up product information, they're actually setting calendar reminders and actually managing their day on these devices. And we expect this behavior to continue as time goes on. So the good news is, as a marketer, as a brand, as a business, you have a lot of opportunity to leverage what's already being done by creating these experiences and being there when your audience is looking for it. So as we start to craft these experiences, how do we go about it? And at Pragmatic, we use this idea, this concept that's called useful and usable. And so what we want to make sure is we're giving value not only to our audience, but also to the business that we're doing work for, so that everyone gets something out of it. So obviously, in traditional marketing days past, it was always about pushing your message out, just getting it out there in shotgun approach. And that was really suiting the business's interest more than anything else. It didn't necessarily solve an audience problem. maybe it entertained or whatever, but it wasn't truly taking the audience's needs into consideration. So what we actually propose is kind of figuring out what both sides of the equation is so that you're actually delivering value to both. So you want to make sure your content is valuable to the user and actually helps them do something, move on. It actually helps them complete a task, move on with their day, get the information they're looking for. And you want to make sure that it's usable so that they actually can get it. They can get it easily. It's easily understood. They can navigate through it easily and effectively, and quite frankly, move on with their day. And this idea of being useful and usable is incredibly valuable to a voice experience. The other thing to keep in mind is when you're creating these experiences, you want to account for your audience's needs and the business's objectives and look at where those things overlap. And that's actually where you're going to start creating this experience. So it's not weighted too heavily towards your audience or too much towards what the business is trying to achieve, but you're actually looking for that sweet spot in the middle. So you're serving both masters.
It's important to also keep in mind that that's where you're going to be able to deliver genuine value, because you're going to be able to deliver against what you're promising because your business aligns with that. As we talk about voice first, we're also talking customer first. At its purest form, an audio-only experience leads completely with the customer needs. You can't just talk about your brand in a 5-minute monologue and expect to have a successful voice experience. So it is up there that we have the discipline of having the prioritization and focus for our content. As we move outward towards adding things like screens and videos and more of an interactive image or engaging type of experience, then we are able to enhance with additional pieces of content. However, we're adding them. We're not necessarily changing what the questions we're answering. We're just simply adding different ways. So we'll be able to add a visual or a video or something along those lines. It's important we keep those customer tasks and needs at the heart, though, of all the content we put together.
And like Susan said before, the user's information needs don't change. Like if they're at the very beginning of the process, they still need that same information. It doesn't really matter if they're doing it through video or blog or voice or podcast or whatever. Those needs are always going to remain constant. Where it really becomes different is the way they interact with that content. So that's why it's really important to get to kind of that crux of what your audience is looking for, so that you're actually providing value all the way along the path to purchase, all the way along the different content pieces that they're going to actually engage with.
And as you then start thinking about what these experiences should be, your customer journey is very much your guide. Chances are you've already been thinking about your customer journey and you've been thinking about the tasks that are relevant to your awareness, to consideration, to purchase, and even retention. And so you have a beginning and you have the start of where can voice start to make this an easier proposition. You've been solving some of these problems all along, but maybe not with voice. And so you can start to think about, how does voice, again, make the right fit in there, and can it help with that? So that way then I'm finding a new way to solve this problem better. And if there are problems perhaps you haven't been able to solve because of limitations in other channels, here's another time an opportunity to stop and say, hey, maybe within voice, this makes sense. And I can start to even address new problems because I've already started to handle the others. So you've got a place to start. It isn't starting from ground zero.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to note is you already have content if you're a brand and you've been putting out, web content, blog content, video content, audio content. You already have a place to start. So you probably already have an idea of some information areas that will resonate with your audience. And so it's not a start from scratch proposition. It's very much, let's build upon what you've already got versus starting over.
Yes. And it's helpful to have that as well, because that's going to make sure that you are, again, creating something that fits within the ecosystem, because a broken customer experience is something that I just saw some recent stats of almost 72% of the audience was concerned that if something wasn't matching up in another channel, it made them question whether or not they would want to continue or engage with that brand, because it kind of doesn't have its act together when you don't have all the cylinders firing together in unison.
Yep. So a few ideas to get you started thinking about your voice experience for your brand. During the awareness phase, you could go through and optimize your web content to make sure that it's findable when people use voice search. Last year, it was about 250 billion voice searches were actually conducted in the US alone. And so it's imperative that your content is findable when people are using their smart speakers, but also when they're using their smartphones or their desktops. So with that, you're going to want to make sure that you're optimizing your content for what we refer to as long tail search versus keywords. So that would really be the first area that you want to look into if you haven't already started optimizing your web content.
And when it comes to consideration and research, after you've been able to get someone to move from understanding who you are, you can start to develop your credibility through the content that you have that's available through voice. You can also deliver the information a prospect needs to start informing their choices as they move into research and then purchase. This helps set the stage for them having the information of answering them those important 3 questions of, is this the right company? Can they solve my problem? And why would I want to work with them? All 3 of those questions can be answered during that consideration phase with some really incredible voice experiences.
Yeah, and during the purchase phase, you're going to want to go through and give them all the tools they need to actually make a purchase. So whether it's a store locator, contact information, if it's a physical store, store hours, being able to order online, anything like that to really help them complete the task of making the purchase is really things that you're going to want to focus on here. There's actually a really great chart from eMarketer where they actually show all the different areas of the purchase journey and how many people are actually completing each one of those. So if you're a brand that actually is doing marketing for retail, this is a great way to say, as long as we have all of these different tasks completed, we're actually going to have that complete journey so that people can make purchases through these devices.
Yeah. And then after you've gotten someone to purchase and you now have the phase of keeping them, basically to retain them as your brand advocate and to move them towards that evangelical type of behavior of telling everyone else about your brand. This is an opportunity for you to provide that top-notch customer support in another channel that is accessible 24/7. You can help them understand how to use the product, and you can even look at upsells when you deliver the product or pieces like that. Driving them back to your skill where there's content about that, that's going to help you. And the other exciting thing during the retention phase, and actually even during consideration and research, is that as people are asking things about your product, this can inform you about what it is that they expect from your product. What is it that they hope to get from it? And if it's something that you don't have, it's something you can start to think through for future road mapping or iterations, or it helps you understand how you've positioned it and how then that's being received by your intended audience. But the most important thing as we look through all of this is to be consistent. Again, I had mentioned it earlier in this talk. If you do not deliver consistently across all of your channels, you start to break down your customer experience. And when you start to break that down, it also starts to break down trust and also preference. So it's really important that you think about how your voice experience is going to fit within all those channels. And it very well may be that those channels are supporting and driving traffic to your voice experience, or it might be that your voice experience is actually driving customers to other channels to either complete purchases, to complete lead gen or things along those lines, but that they're all working together so that it feels genuine and that they're all part of a continuous fiber, and that fabric then is all one thing that makes up your brand.
Yeah, we see voice as another tool in your toolbox to be a complete omni-channel marketer. And so this is a way that you can use another channel, a new channel in your disposal to actually reach your customers.
And not only are you thinking about the holistic way that everything works together, it's also important to be on brand. And what that means is doing more than just following style guides or making sure that your copy is right. It's also about making sure that you're thinking through how your brand is going to sound to the rest of the world. When you close your eyes, can someone actually tell your brand from your competitor? And that's an important thing to think through. It's also important to think through the system persona and how is that going to embody your brand. And when we think about voice and tone is also how will you respond to different situations? Because there's moments where it's a time for compassion, a time for firmness, or a time for confidence. And so you need to think through what are the word choices, but also what are the tonalities that I'm going to have in that voice so that performance conveys all of the things I need it to convey.
And for a lot of brands, you're going to want to go through and have voice actors perform the reads. You're not going to want to use the poly voices because the last thing you want if you're Coke is to sound like Pepsi. And so that's a big challenge right now with a lot of these stock computer voices. And while there's some that believe that the users don't care, there's still preference. There's still affinity built into the voices that you use. And there's a lot of science that goes into picking the voice talent that you're using. So highly encourage you to look into using human actors and actresses to perform your brand so that they're actually able to give it the life that it so deserves.
And then the other important part of this is including it everywhere. As I like to tell many of our clients, the good news is you're being innovative. You're moving into this new channel that is somewhat virgin territory. The other side of that is that you're going to have to explain to your audiences that it's there because it's not second nature to think, oh, I'll just go check that out. And then the other more important part of that is they won't know where to find it or how to use it. So you have that burden a little bit of explaining, here's how to use it, and here's how it is. And again, just as we were talking about the importance of consistency, this is another opportunity in that consistency where you can weave your voice experience, mentions and understanding and promotions about it all into your other channels so that it all becomes one cohesive piece.
When we first started doing voice and putting together our process, we actually had a 3-step process. So it was discovery, it was design and develop, and it was post-launch optimization. And we quickly realized that we were actually missing a critical component, and that was actually the promotion piece. So the promotion and launch piece is incredibly vital for you to actually be able to drive traffic. So whether your objective is to get some early users to get initial feedback, or if you're ready for prime time and you're actually ready for mass adoption, you need to have a plan to actually get the message out that this thing exists and what they do. So you have to use your paid, own, and earn channels. So whether it's your, any SEM work that you have, any paid social that you have, putting something in your email signature, something as simple as that to make people aware that if they have one of these devices, all they have to say is, Alexa, open blah, 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 and they can actually start to get that experience. Any way you have it at your disposal, you're going to want to make sure that you're doing so that you put yourself in the best chance for success.
So in summary, while consumer behaviors have changed, there is still very much an opportunity for voice. Just because things are different doesn't mean that things are closed off. It's a matter of just finding those opportunities and continuing to pursue them. And in some places, the time is right because we are continually being asked to do more with less, and not just less resources, but less touch points, even less physical interaction. So this is definitely a time where voice can step in and be a bit of a hero. And chances are you've probably started some of this work. And so that's going to let you focus your resources less on perhaps defining the problem and more on getting this voice experience right and making sure that the conversations truly feel like conversations and it's not just picked up content from somewhere else. And then it's also important to remember that voice is the customer experience part of that ecosystem. So it's important that the content works with others. So that way then it's consistent across channels so that you have a holistic brand experience. And finally, make sure that you do promote your experiences so that you can drive the right people to use it. I like to talk about how it's really, you've taken all this time to get to know someone's problems. You've taken the time to create these conversations just for them. Go that extra mile. You know who they are. Let them know that you've created something for them and get their input and probably get the good graces of having created something for that audience and kind of cash in on it.
Yep. So I know we covered a lot of ground over the past 30 minutes or so, and we weren't able to go into any great depth on any of these specific topics, but we do have a book that we wrote called Voice Strategy, Creating Useful and Usable Voice Experiences. In this book, we actually talk about the upfront business opportunity and what voice means for search, for e-commerce, and really business in general. And then the last 2/3 of the book are actually our process. So how you would actually go about discovering what your audience's needs are, how you would actually go through and create a promotional plan so that once you have this great voice experience, you can let the world know that it exists. And finally, what you actually do after you get some results back from your experience and how you can actually optimize it and enhance your experience so that it continues to derive value for not only your audience, but also for the business. So if you go to voicestrategybook.com, you can pick up our book. Thank you so much for watching our presentation. We hope you found it useful
and usable.
If you have any questions, feel free to use the links below our names to find our contact information on Twitter, LinkedIn, our email, and also a link directly to get our book.
We look forward to chatting with you soon.